Just a few quick words about the work that we're doing here in Hawaii. Clearly, this was about LA Unified and about the black and white racial disparity. I want to be clear that there is not a policy of random searches here in the Hawaii Department of Education. However, we do have police officers in schools on some of the other islands, and we do see racial disparity in the school-based arrest data. And that's something that I'm working on requesting data from every single county's police department, and a team at ACLU National is analyzing the data to see what the racial disparities are, particularly among our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander student populations. So as we get set up, I'd like to welcome our panelists up to the stage so that we can begin our questions. And everyone should have received an index card. Please write questions on the index card. We'll have ACLU staff collecting these questions and bringing them up to me at the table. And so when you're done with the question, go ahead and raise it in the air and somebody will be by to collect it from you. Thank you so much. Please come join us. All right. Can you all hear me? Okay. No one said that they could hear me. Okay, great. So I already have a lot of questions here in front of me. I have some prepared questions too. Every speaker's bio is in your pamphlet here, so I'm not going to spend some of our precious discussion time introducing our illustrious speakers. Oh, here we are. Thank you. You were lying to me when I said, can you hear me? Okay, so first, since Amir was in the episode, we're lucky to have a local celebrity here with us, can you talk a little bit about specifically what school hardening is, what punitive school discipline is, and how that can impact students and their ability to learn?
Sure. First of all, mahalo to everyone for coming out. Mahalo to the Honolulu Museum of Art for hosting us, and the ACLU of Hawaii for inviting us and screening us, and definitely to you all for coming out to learn about this issue. And that relates to school hardening. So school hardening is a phrase that Donald Trump used last year after the Parkland shooting, and encourage schools to harden their policies. And they reflect, policies like random searches, like metal detectors at the front door, security cameras all over the place, and different policies that make schools look more like prison. But unfortunately, research shows many of these policies don't actually reduce, crime on campus or school shootings on campus or different things like that. And we have districts, as was shown in the documentary, LAUSD spends $70 million a year on school police. So school hardening policies also take away critical resources that schools need. And I'm sure the schools in Hawaii are like the schools in California, like schools everywhere, in terms of needing more resources to ultimately do their job. So school hardening policies are basically the wrong choice oftentimes to protect children, and it's the wrong investment in resources oftentimes.
We'll just go down the line and go through some of the pieces related to school hardening and arrests. Commonly, what we've seen is that some students who get suspended for certain offenses, like having a vape on campus, also get arrested by the police for the same offense. So now you have a suspension and a juvenile arrest and have to go through either diversion or some other family court mandated program in order to either eventually end up being charged or have the charge dismissed. But
One magical word, apologies. zero tolerance is a part of school policy hardening as well. Yeah, and zero tolerance is something that started, it's part of this system of mass incarceration that has happened in the past few decades, where we've just shifted to more punitive approach. And school hardening started, in the 90s when that, or zero tolerance, when that narrative of the super predator youth and adolescent came out. And then once the Columbine shooting happened, that led to more zero tolerance, where it's basically, the same response to all types of behavior. So if you're late to school, you're suspended. Or if you have a hat on, or if you're breaking the dress code, you don't have your belt on, you can get suspended. Where it's the same response to different types of behaviors, just a blanket response, and it treats behavior and the complicated lives of adolescents as if a one-size-fits-all approach could work.
So, Darcia, in your role as a deputy public defender who mostly has juvenile clients, what do you see as sort of the main drivers of juvenile arrests and how they end up at your office?
So, I'm the supervisor of our felony division. So my experience is from that role. What we're seeing really, it just comes down to poverty, disenfranchisement, lack of access to resources. We're particularly concerned about our Pacific Islander communities, the Micronesian community, and also our Native Hawaiian community. And it's just growing up in housing, growing up in really poor conditions, growing up with parents who may be homeless. What you're seeing is that this just breeds the inability to kind of go to school, be in a pro-social situation, and it leads to criminal activity.
Okay, and Heidi, I know that the superintendent is starting the 2020 to 2030 strategic planning process. What aspects of that process will impact or affect school climate and discipline, and reducing disparities in school discipline?
I've left these on the table for those of you on your way out if you'd like to pick it up, but the department has started with promises, and we have 5 promises that by the end of our 10-year strategic plan, what is it going to take to get to these things? And within our promises, and I won't read them all, but I think some are very important to this conversation. We're promising for equity that students will experience strong relationships and supports that mitigate disempowering differences. And I think Darcia just talked about some disempowering differences. So the department is very committed to providing the supports that are needed so that we don't get to the actions that lead to discipline. We've revised our Chapter 19, which is our discipline policy, and in that document, we're very clear that our discipline is at the end of a continuum of proactive student supports. So we want to provide the wraparound services. We want to get to what are the causes of these behaviors so that we can stop them, prevent them, or support the students in making better decisions before we get to that behavior. I know Amir just spoke about the zero tolerance and the one-size-fits-all discipline. Well, the department absolutely does not issue a one-size-fits-all discipline. Discipline is very unique to the individual student, and it's based on the thought of what is the action that it's going to take to help change the behavior of that child. And what action might be taken for one child is going to be very different for another child based on their needs.
Thank you, Heidi. There are a few questions from the audience that I would like to highlight. Here, this relates to both Heidi and Amir. Do the Hawaii schools have counselors and nurses in each school now? And how do we advocate for school psychologists and quality school counselors? Amir, would you like to talk about the recent Cops and No Counselors report?
Sure, absolutely. And you heard some of the facts from the report shared in the documentary. T.I., the rapper, who talked about his son hitting the wall thing, when he shared a statistic about there being more police in American schools than social workers. That came from our report, which I was the co-author of, and we combined with 5 different affiliates, ACLU affiliates, so multiple states came together, and we did the first national analysis of counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, and school nurses ever, because last year was the first time in history the federal government actually reported this. But unfortunately with Hawaii, there was some data conundrum that led to different school staff not being reported. So it was the only state where, not only with law enforcement in schools, but several critical data points that we should know about our schools, for all schools. All 96,000 schools were mentioned in that report, and we're going to share a tool tonight that allows you to click and access it. So we have some understanding of that, at least with the national data for other states, but in Hawaii, we didn't see the data there.
So we have a couple copies of this report out front, but it's available online if you want to Google Cops No Counselors ACLU.
Yeah, aclu.org/cops, not counselors. I'm sorry, counselors and no cops. Yeah, counselors and no cops.
Surprise! Tribal!
Completely ignore that last part. Sorry about that.
So Heidi, to reiterate the question for you, how do we advocate for school psychologists and quality school counselors? And do Hawaii schools have counselors and nurses in each school now?
Sure. And I know before I answer that question, I will preface, I know Ray and ACLU are always saying we need to be more transparent with our data. And when I saw what was written in the Cops and No Counselors report, we got to figure out a way to get our data out there, because the data that was reported in there is not accurate, and I'm sure it was based on whatever source that it was taken from. So I went and I got some recent statistics that we do have counselors in every school. We have 611 counselors in our department, 88 school psychologists, a total of 534 mental health professionals, which include the clinical psychologists, the behavioral health specialists, mental health supervisors, social workers, and human service professionals. So we do have an abundance of those resources. We are always looking to fill more positions, so that's one of our struggles. And another stat in there was school nurses. We have school health aides in every school. Every complex area does have a nurse that we're provided through Hawaii Keiki in a partnership with UH Manoa, so we're very appreciative of that.
In terms of the data, we just use the federal data, which every school, every state is obligated under law to respond to. So we used it, assuming that they complied with federal law.
I took a look at, because the report says Hawaii has 0 school psychologists, and I took a look at that. It turns out that all the school psychologists are staffed at the complex area level, so they aren't reported at the individual school level, which is how the data is rolled up into the federal reporting. So yes, data transparency is great, something hopefully that we can work on moving forward.
Can you elaborate why it wasn't? Like you said, it wasn't. Not reported, and you're not actually explaining why it's not happening. All your statement that it didn't happen and it needs to happen, but you're not actually, and you're talking about transparency, but you're not saying why it didn't happen. Like, this is major reports about why we're here, and we're saying we're the only state that wasn't reported. And pretty much it's just, I feel like, from what I'm gathering, it's just, we're going to take care of it. That's the answer to that. Pretty much we always receive about major things, but I have heard no explanation of why, out of all the states, Hawaii is the only one that did not report major.
Just a quick housekeeping question. Thank you for your question. If you need an index card to write your question down, please raise your hand, and the ACLU staffer will come around.
The video said we're not going to be silent, and If we're here to get answers, then please provide them. Because we're tired of always saying also, DOE does not take care of it later.
There's
The social
misinformation
workers
being shared.
take care of it later.
The board
That's what we do. So can you please answer why it was not reported? Why of all the states, why it was not reported?
Go ahead, Heidi. Yeah.
And this is 2015-16 data that you took, so I don't have an answer for you. I don't know why it wasn't reported. I'm not sure what the source of, where the data was pulled.
I'd like to know why the authors of the study didn't track the dates down, because the data exists.
And why all the schools didn't report?
Well, the schools do report it. The good answer for this, I can't answer why the data wasn't in this report, but I can answer that we do have school psychologists, and that's very important to us.
That, I understand that we have psychologists, again, you didn't answer the question. Why wasn't it reported?
I answered, I don't know why this particular data, and I'm not sure it wasn't reported. I just don't know why the data wasn't in there, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move on to our next question. What are suggested improvements to policies around vaping, weapons, and drug use? And that, I think, could be an Amir and Darcia question in different ways.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I can. What are suggested improvements to policies around vaping, weapons, and drug use?
Okay, so I can't speak to DOE policy or policies because that's not what my role is. Me and my team, we get involved after someone's been charged, after a juvenile has been charged with a law violation or a status offense like runaway or truancy. So I think my best contribution to the question is to talk about maybe policies when it comes to drugs. So we have a lot of youth that are experimenting with drugs, and that's just a fact. What we're concerned about are two things, I think: how they get filtered into the criminal justice system and how they move from being processed as a law violator versus diverted into substance abuse treatment. And our office feels that there's a dearth of substance abuse programs that are targeted to the youth. What we see is programs that are a little too light, and what we need are some very serious substance abuse programs that go a little deeper and more in depth that are available to the kids, especially catching our middle schoolers before they end up in high school, because at least from my perspective, if we can catch them at the middle school level, then we'll have a much higher success rate with them intervention-wise before they get into high school. I just feel like our middle schoolers is the gap group.
And, in terms of vaping, I just saw a study that said nationwide adolescent use of vaping is increasing. So I think, more of what Heidi said in terms of the response matching the behavior. I've represented students suspended for vaping or just basically kicked out of school, right? And when it comes to suspension, I'm more on the side of just abolition because I feel the right to education should never be suspended. But something like vaping, right? Where the root issue, well, some of it is with the vaping companies targeting students or youth with the flavors and all of that stuff, right? So, but a response and intervention for that specific issue. We can't just throw the kid in detention or just, to kick them away just because they did something. And it's the same thing with weapons in school. And I heard that fortunately with some of like the more serious weapons, Hawaii may not be impacted, but we know, I represented a student who was first grader who brought a knife to school to cut her orange, and didn't understand, right, that she had brought a weapon. And then there's a zero tolerance policy if you bring a weapon or a knife. So we had a student facing expulsion essentially. So if they would just address the root issue every time, with every response. And that takes time. We understand administrators are busy. The easy thing to do is kick them out of school, punish. And we really need to shift away, because punishment alone never changes behavior. It leads to resentment. And we're already pushing the youth away too much. So we really have to, if a youth's vaping or has a knife, we need to respond to that behavior.
This question is from a teacher in the audience. I'm very concerned about the drug suspensions. One of my students was suspended for 90 school days when they searched his backpack and found a seed. Another because his hands smelled like marijuana. Students suspended for 90 days will fail the school year. What can be done to change this?
So for some offenses, suspensions can be up until 92 days. That is in our guidelines. The key is up to 92 days. And so individual schools and administrators determine the length of time. Whenever a student is suspended for 10 or more days, they have to receive schooling. And so they do go to school, whether it's in another class on the campus, which some schools do. Some districts have an off-campus site where students who have, we call them long-term suspensions, attend school. In the case of drug offenses, a lot of times when students are suspended and they've completed and they've been shown to have a drug problem and they've completed one of the courses or the drug treatment programs during that time that Darcia had mentioned, then they do return to school upon completion of that program. That's a very common practice within the department. So it is up until 92 days. We don't want any student out for 92 days, but sometimes there are things that need to happen, such as drug treatment prior to their return to school for their well-being and the safety of other students.
And if I may add to that, it's important to note, because some of this is paraphernalia and in a criminal court, right, it wouldn't hold up as drugs, and it's really important because we've created a universe where schools become these hyper-criminalized environments where they're the only places you can get penalized or arrested. The random search policy is the only place where you get your hand sanitizer and lotion and stuff confiscated. So schools are these zones of hyper-criminalization. We have to move away from that. And, drug use is a problem, and we have to address it. It's rising nationwide and stuff like that. And removing a kid from school first of all, to remove a kid from school for more than 10 days, there's certain due process protections and different things that have to take place. So I hope that's happening in Hawaii. If not, that's something we will look into. The Supreme Court has held that, after 10 days, that their interest in education is to the point that you can't just deprive them of it after 10 days. But yeah, it's important to keep the kids in school. I know for me, schools were a safe haven and, oftentimes the safest place for students to be during the day. So we really need to keep them there.
I just want to add something. So apart from the suspension issue, if a child or a juvenile has a referral to the family court, I just really want to emphasize that I think right now the family court has a very strong push to diversion for children who are new to getting into trouble or new to having referrals into the family court system. If a child is found, let's say, with paraphernalia, it's probably unlikely they're going to necessarily be charged with a law violation. There are procedures in place, yeah. So, I'm just saying there are options in the between criminal charges and suspension. There's this in-between part called diversion, and the family court's really committed to expanding their diversion programs, and their diversion programs will include things like treatment if it's necessary and looking at other options. So I just really wanted to make sure that was included in the discussion.
And one of the things I just want to note for everyone that we were looking at is the types of diversions in each of the counties. And when we think of diversion, we ideally want pre-arrest diversion, so kids don't go through the trauma of being arrested and then also having an arrest record, even if it is a juvenile arrest record. In Maui County, there are police in schools. They arrest on every instance of tobacco violation that they see. So if you have a vape, you can get arrested. And then they go through diversion, and the diversion program is run by the Maui Police Department. So there are issues, I think, with some ways that we structure diversion here in the state. But let's move on to more audience questions. I have a couple categories here. One of the categories, let's talk about students with disabilities. So what special programs does the DOE have for students of color with emotional disabilities? And then related to that, how do teachers get data on how many students with IEPs are getting suspended? And can we get that data disaggregated? So what special programs does DOE have for students of color with disabilities? And is there a way to get data on how many students with disabilities are being suspended?
So if the special programs would be for students of any color. We don't have a special program for students of color, but any student who does need mental health services will receive counseling or school-based mental health services, or even receive services or testing from a clinical psychologist depending on the needs. So the services are open to all children, but the specific service would be based on the specific need.
The second one is, do we have data on the number of students who are being suspended who have IEPs or who are students with disabilities?
Yes, we do. And we do have, it's not the highest percentage, but a high number of our special needs students do receive suspensions. And that is something that we are working on and addressing, getting to the root cause and what can we do to mitigate that. But that is a number that is real. And we don't want to see that, just like we don't want to see the number of our Pacific Island students being higher, and that is higher as well. With the Pacific Island population, we do recognize some is acculturation, or some is acclimating, some is understanding the culture, that is their culture. And as a department, we're making a concerted effort to go into the communities and talk to the community leaders, talk to the parents, talk to the students. Let's hear from the student voice. What do they need, and what do we as a department, but not a department alone, because it takes the community, but in our realm, what can we do from the department to help you be successful? And the department is working diligently on that, because the numbers are real and we don't want to see those numbers.
Are you including Hawaiian and part Hawaiian children in the Pacific Island category?
Yes, and we have data for both, and Hawaiian suspension is high, and Pacific Island suspension is high.
And then the intersectionality of disability and, whether it's Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, or whatever, multiplies. And here in Hawaii, our national report before this one, if you go to aclu.org/school discipline, and the link will also be on this tool we'll share, we found that in Hawaii, they have the highest rate of days lost to suspension for students with disabilities in the nation. So nationally, students lose about 23 days per 100. Just general students, but here in Hawaii, students with disabilities miss over 100 days per 100, meaning there are more days lost to suspension than there are students with disabilities in the state. And it's nationally just an outlier in that area, and that's 5 times the rate for all students nationally.
And would you be able to actually, sorry, Ms. Armstrong, you didn't say the percentage, you just said it was a high number, you didn't actually say, you said we had the percentage.
I have our statistics. I can give you our latest numbers. And they're available publicly. These are available publicly. Let me see if I have that paper.
And while you're looking at that, because you also stated when the question was asked about questions or services or counseling services or programs for people of color, you had alluded that it was inclusive. And inclusion is very important in school. But as you read the data and you say that it's very high in Polynesian people and students of color, and that we talk about the emotional traumas of the colonization and everything that is happening, but yet your tone towards the inclusion, we're inclusive to all, is actually part of the root cause of everything that these students are going through. It's because there is no safe space for people of color, for people that have been colonized on this land, that are in schools, that are not always predominantly within people that understand their experience. But the push toward inclusion also is very dismissive to the question of the need of what you said, of talking to the students. And with working with many of these students, I know that is a need. So as a person of color, as a teacher in the school district, and working with these students, I find it very offensive as an assistant superintendent, the dismissiveness from a lot of the questions, to also include earlier when we were talking about the main point of this, of how to address the issues with it. Almost all of your responses have been punitive. What the DOE done, punitive. Not one suggestion that I've heard has been about how do we actually stop this from happening, which again, a lot of the responsibility, if not all, for these behaviors and actions have been put on these youth. I have not heard about what the teachers do to help mitigate these circumstances, addressing the actions.
I need to cut in. I'm sorry. I would love to talk to you after personally. I'm a legal fellow at the ACLU. I'm working on these issues. I really want to hear about your perspectives. I do also want to hear from the panelists that were brought here today to share some of the issues that they've seen on the ground. So I'm gonna let Heidi look for that figure that you've asked for and respond.
In my bag.
Okay.
I can answer another
Sure,
question.
go ahead.
And the department is, and I do say inclusive because we are inclusive of all, and I do recognize that. Okay. The department is.
Why are Native Hawaiian students getting suspended at much higher rates if the department is inclusive of all? Can you answer that?
That's a very deep question. If we had the answer in 1 minute, we would be able to solve the problem. But the department does really have a comprehensive way of being. We call it nahapena a'o, and we call it breath, where we really want the B as a sense of belonging. We do want the sense of belonging for every student. Students don't come to us as empty vessels. They come to us with a wealth of experiences from their home, their culture, their school experience, family experience, where they've lived, and we embrace that. So we don't view them as empty vessels
We don't, actually.
that we fill. Well, let me finish the breath, which is our department-wide framework for how we want to be. We as the employees need to live it. We want it ingrained in our students and in our community. And it's the sense of belonging in the paper. There's a paper out there for you. Strengthened sense of responsibility, and what is my responsibility to myself, what is my responsibility to others, and what is my responsibility to those that I serve. And that would be for our teachers to our students. A strengthened sense of excellence, and instilling that perseverance and hope for our children. A strengthened sense of aloha. Where do we come from? What are our values? And what is our sense of respect for ourselves and others? A total sense of total well-being, because we do focus on academics, but we also focus on the whole child, and that's the social and emotional needs of all the children that we serve. And then the strengthened sense of Hawaii. What does it mean to attend a school?
So I'm sorry, I have 30 questions here in front of me from the audience, and I'd like to get through some more of the topics. So for Darcia, who pays for drug treatment? What if parents can't afford it? And then what about the disparate treatment of drug offenses? So this person has heard that a child in Waianae may get processed into the criminal justice system, but a child in Kahala might only have to visit the school counselor.
So if you're a juvenile in the, sorry. If you're a juvenile who has been referred into the family court system, payment is through the family court if you're court ordered. And there's, if you're in foster care, you may get some monies and services through the Department of Human Services. You may get services through family court resources. So there's a lot of different ways it might get paid for if you're in the family court system. Pre-family court, I can't speak to that. I'm sorry, I don't have that information. I just know that if you're unfortunately being processed, the judges, when they're ordering treatment, will generally look at how is it going to be paid for, which agency is the best agency, what resources can be provided, and they work with the families and they work with the different agencies to get the services paid for. That's sort of the best answer I can get because it depends.
Thank you. And for Amir, this is a double question. What bills should we look out for that will eliminate police forces on school campuses? And so perhaps not necessarily here specific to our legislature, but what bills have you seen in other jurisdictions that have eliminated police in schools and also eliminated out-of-school suspensions?
Right. So this year in the California legislature, we had to defeat 2 bills to add police in every school. And we did not see a single bill to ensure that a counselor was in every school or a nurse was in every school. And that goes to show you what some of our legislators are prioritizing, or what seems to be the quick, easy response to the crisis of mental health that's happening right nationwide. But back in one of the most interesting findings of our report, back in 1975, only 1% of schools have police, and our report found now in many states, 75% of schools have police. Yet school shootings haven't gone down and different things haven't happened. So in terms of any legislation to add police in school or to, move towards that sort of thing, you should just look at the impact. And that's actually what they did in Texas. They looked at the impact of a government grant that put millions of dollars to add extra police in schools, and they found that it did not have a significant impact on safety, on crime on campus. And, school shootings still happen, unfortunately. And we looked at what New Zealand did after their school, mass shootings, right? So we're not actually addressing the issue, but police in schools don't. You saw the montage of police brutality in schools that happened. That's kind of what happened. Although there are some quote unquote good cops and officers that care for students, it's found to have harmful impacts on students.
Can I just add something? So I just really want to speak to the trauma of getting arrested. If you are a juvenile and you are being arrested in school, you are handcuffed. There is a blue and white that is ready to receive you, and you are taken to a police station, and your parent is not in that car. It's just you and a police officer. And it doesn't matter how nice or kind that officer may be. The trauma of being handcuffed and taken to a police station like a criminal has long-standing impacts, especially if it's a minor offense or if you're not guilty because you're just not guilty of what they've accused you of. Just the arrest alone, not what we saw in the video with the violence, okay? Just the simple act of being handcuffed is trauma, and it's traumatizing to children. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Darcia. Thank you. I want to point out that some of the data that we've pulled from the police departments about school-based arrests, you have kids as young as 11 being handcuffed and arrested for various offenses, including minor nonviolent offenses. So along those lines, can you speak to replacement alternatives to punitive action in schools? There are not enough resources or school psychiatrists in schools, and this question's from a DOE teacher. So for Heidi and then perhaps Amir, please speak to replacement alternatives to punitive action in schools.
Sure. Restorative justice is key, and we do have many schools moving toward restorative justice, where the student internalizes the action that was done, works with those that action offended, and comes to a higher ground on how do we move forward from this. And so restorative justice is
Thank you. Because I've been in charge of that, and it's not happening in the DOE. And there's no schools that have adopted any policies about it. There's one charter school that has it, and I asked them who trains them, and they said they don't get training. The principal just talked about it. So where's the training happening?
Okay, I can give you the name. If you give me your information, I can send you the schools that are implementing restorative justice. And we also have trauma-informed care.
We can also post that information on our website.
I'll give it to you.
So we know what works, right? So restorative justice, trauma-informed care, as you were alluding to. And sometimes I feel we complicate this question of alternatives too much, because what we need to do is just leave the child alone sometimes. Adolescents, I'm known as Dr. Knucklehead. I have a nonprofit called Project Knucklehead, because we understand adolescence is a phase where children will push buttons and risk take, and our responsibility as adults and as the village is to wrap our hands around them, not push them away. So I would say half of the suspensions that I've represented students in didn't even have to happen in the first place, in my opinion. And tomorrow I'm spending my afternoon, thanks you to Miliana, in one of the youth correctional facilities here, because I've been teaching and working with the most difficult youth, and then teaching music where it's noise, right? Organized noise. And I've never had to say, remove this child, and I know I have privilege as a male of color and different things, but I think there are ways to respond to behavior that don't include removing the child.
So another big category of questions that we have here are what training is provided to teachers and administrators to address racial and cultural bias and discrimination, and especially in trauma-informed care, and specifically not just teachers, but also counselors, to provide racial diversity training, sensitivity. Heidi?
Specific racial training, we don't have a specific training for specific races, but we do, in our social emotional trainings, do address racial diversity. We live in a very multicultural, multilinguistic state, and we're surrounded by racial diversity. And so our trainings do honor and incorporate the different cultures that exist here, and we're very lucky and fortunate to have such a myriad of cultures. And within our trainings, we address it, we address that, and we embrace that, and we honor that, and I think we're very lucky that we have that.
So in other words, no, we're not addressing the issue.
We are addressing the issue by honoring the variety of cultures by honoring the different cultures that we do.
Honoring the different cultures.
Excuse me, anti-racism training? Thank you.
Just say no. If you don't know, it is okay to say I don't know.
No, well, we don't have a training, an anti-racial training, but within, and I'll go back to our social emotional learning and recognizing and valuing the importance of.
Is that why I get treated with discrimination by the staff, the teachers at school? Is because they don't know how to deal, they don't get trained. Because I can tell you at nearly every school I teach at, as a substitute teacher, I have been spoken to like a nigger, I have been spoken to as less than, and have taken up multiple times. I see the way these teachers speak to the students. I have reported multiple teachers physically assaulting preschool. Of stuff.
We do have our safe workplace policy where.
Tell us how you are addressing these needs. And I understand you're smiling because you're nervous, because you do not know, and it is not being addressed. But do not disrespect these people and gaslight them. They have their kids out here. They are trying to receive help. You have taken a position as an assistant superintendent because you are supposed to have the skill set to actually be able to answer these questions, to address these needs, to help protect our children. And you do not. You are receiving a paycheck at the expense of our youth. And if you want to know why I'm so angry, it is because I work and have worked with the Youth Suicide Prevention Program here. I have worked with the mental illness here. I have worked with the homeless youth here. And I've worked with most of these people in this room here. And you have not honored them once by just admitting you don't know. And nothing is really in action being done to address the needs of these schools. You have to put all the responsibility on these kids. Not once on the teachers, not once on yourself or the Board of Education.
I'm going to cut in and let Heidi respond to part of that, and then I have a question for Darcia, and then we're going to go through maybe one or two more questions, and then have Amir show us the data dashboard that he's created for everyone today.
Sure, and I will say we do take each student and adult and their care and well-being very seriously. We do.
Please let her finish. Please.
Kid gets slammed into a wall.
If you have seen that, I would actually like to follow up with you about that specific instance. Thank you. And then please let her
I would like
finish.
to hear on that incident because that would not be. Okay, but we do support, and you mentioned our homeless students, and we do know the challenges that our homeless students do face, and the department is very committed to supporting them. We have homeless liaisons in every complex area who work with the families to connect them to the social services that they can be getting benefit from. We also ensure that we provide tutoring for those students after school, in the libraries, in their shelters, if they happen to be at a shelter. So we do take our disadvantaged students. We have migrant students that we provide additional supports for, and we have migrant students predominantly on the Big Island and on Kauai, and we provide them. And we also listen to our students and what they want to have an improved school culture and a safe and nurturing learning environment. And we just finished a school culture conference where high school students took on a design thinking project and put together their final presentations for their school in, if we want to improve the climate and the culture at our school, what would it look like? It was student-led, it was student voice, it is shared with the school will act on these recommendations, and then to take it further and grow it, we would move to a student voice conference where they can share that publicly. So we do want to hear student needs. We have respect for all students and all of our employees.
What about the LGBT kids? Because less than 2 months ago at Punitive High School, a student had her.
I'm sorry, we're running out of time. Can I?
We're here the panel as a coordinator for youth mental health first aid in the state of Hawaii.
So you're okay with your misinformation?
I work with students and prevent suicide.
Mm-hmm.
So we would like to hear the panelists.
Misinformation.
We're here and care about LGBTQ issues, and we care about suicide prevention, and we care about our students. And so we would like to hear this panel, because I know every single person on our panel cares about our students and our youth.
Thank you, everyone, for your patience. A quick clarifying question for Darcia, then we'll go down the row and have some final thoughts from each panelist, and then Amir can show us the data dashboard because we're going to run out of time. So, Darcia, are students who are truant arrested or imprisoned these days?
Okay, so it's the policy that they not be arrested, but they may be issued what's called a penal summons. A penal summons is sort of like a warrant, but where you're not arrested. It's a letter that basically says, please come to court. We need to discuss with you your failure to be coming to school. That's sort of the mechanism that gets them into the court system to have a discussion about the truancy issues. So that's sort of my answer to that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we're going to do a lightning speed round of each panelist having a minute or two to finalize their thoughts. Please, I ask, no interruptions because we do need to be out of here on time. If you do have follow-up questions, and I realize I still have over a dozen cards in front of me, please find me after. I'm happy to stay and talk with you about your issues. This is what I'm working on. We've elevated individual instances of misconduct or lack of due process to not just the DOE, but other state and governmental agencies. And we definitely want to hear your voices. And this is just the beginning of our work on this issue. Very clearly, there is a need here in the state to talk about these issues that are affecting our young people. So this isn't the only place that we will be able to hear from you. And we will have information how you can contact us, as well as if you want to file a complaint with the CRCB at the Department of Education. But know that we will continue to have these types of communication with you. We definitely want to hear from you. So let's start with Amir, go down the line, quick 1-2 thoughts, and then we'll share the Tableau dashboard.
Sure. I just want to thank everyone for coming out and sharing your passion and contributing to the conversation. And, I understand I'm an outsider. I understand, I just flew in here yesterday from Los Angeles, and on Sunday I'm leaving. Hopefully get to come back. This is a beautiful place, very beautiful. And I understand Hawaii is very unique. But, as a researcher, and I'm a researcher with the UCLA Civil Rights Project, and I've authored several studies where we've pointed to these data issues where Hawaii is an outlier, not only in transparency, but also in heavy-handed disciplineness. So I understand it's different and unique, but children are children. I think human behavior and I understand parents influence it and poverty influences all of that stuff, but behavior is a communication and it's a cry for help, and we have to respond more to that. And I hope it sounds like we're going to move more towards that here. So thank you all. Mahalo.
So what I want to say is that education is the key to keeping our children out of the adult criminal justice system. There are too many adults in jail and being processed who didn't graduate beyond the 9th grade or the 10th grade and who haven't got a high school diploma. Over the years when I was in our felony division for the adults, it just shocked me how many of my clients barely made it past the 9th grade and just sort of got lost. And if you don't have your high school education or just the fundamentals, life will be hard for you. And it's just so difficult to bounce back. So that's the first thing I want to say. Sorry, I'm not allowed to say. The second thing I want to say is that as a public defender, and when I work with my attorneys, we have 4 attorneys that are assigned to our juvenile division. We are 100% committed to looking at our clients as whole individuals. They are first and foremost children. Second, they need us to be their voice when they're in the criminal justice system, because it's big, it's scary, a lot of bad things can happen to you, and so we are very, very active. I have a great crew. They just get in there and they fight. They fight for the kids. They fight to get answers. Right now, one of the things that I'm really emphasizing is get answers to your questions. Why does this child need to be in detention? What is the justification? What are the alternatives? What can we look at to keep this child out of DH, out of HYCF, and into something more productive for their future? It's just looking at the whole child. So that's really what I wanted to emphasize in terms of the work that the Public Defender's Office does with our juvenile clients. Thank you.
And for the department, I've appreciated this conversation, and I appreciate the collaboration with the other departments, the Juvenile Justice, ACLU, nonprofit, and we need to continue these partnerships in order to reach our goal of having our kids be successful, graduate from school, and have a successful future. We don't want them ending up with you, but it's going to take everybody. And our department is very committed to providing the supports and the means that are necessary to support the diverse group of students that we have. And I invite all of you to look at, and these are the promises of the department that are proposed for the next 10 years for the strategic plan. And you are able to give input on those. And also, what is it going to take to get there? And I think we heard some comments tonight of things that were happening, that were working, of things that weren't happening, or where there is misinformation that we need to clarify in order to work as a community to serve the students in the best possible way.
Thank you. Amir, do you want to bring up the dashboard?
Oh, sure.
And
I believe the link is indicated on your pamphlet, right? It's tinyurl.com/ACLUHI tool, and it's a tool we've created based off the federal data from the report, the Cops Are Not Counselors report, and also from our first school discipline report. And we've created these visualizations here. So I'm going to show you the tool. But these are the islands of Hawaii, and the red rings represent the suspension rates, or schools where students lose twice the national average days to suspension. So you see a lot of hot spots there. So those are not volcanoes erupting, unfortunately. Those are children being deprived of their educational opportunities. So we also have this graphic, but I want to show you it larger. So about 26% of the nation's Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander students, and that's how the U.S. government categorizes it, are in Hawaii. But 65% of the days lost to suspension among these students are occurring here. And it's the same with arrests. 2 out of 3 arrests of Pacific Island, Native Hawaiian students nationwide happen in Hawaii. So this is a graphic I have that is in the tool as well, and we're going to show you the tool, and it's on that link. But it breaks down 3 categories: Hawaii, California, and I just combined 39 states because that's how many I had to get to get to equal numbers. And it's not just Pacific Islander students, but let's look at Asian students all the way on the left. There are about 55,000 Asian students in Hawaii, and in California there are over almost 700,000, right? So over 10 times as much. But there are still almost just as many students arrested here, Asian students arrested here on the islands. And you would have to combine 39 states, so basically every state except for these indicated on the bottom. If you combine them, it's over 1 million Asian students and about 128 arrests, which Hawaii has more than. So that goes to show behavior can't vary that much across oceans and across children. But Pacific Islander students, California we have, or Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander students, we have 40,000, 42,000, and Hawaii they're 55,000, so about nearly the same amount, but there are 10 times as many school arrests of Pacific Islander students here. And it's really important to, disaggregate the data and look at it too. I know in California we do this, so we know, for instance, when you look at Asian arrests and suspensions, Filipino students in different student groups have higher rates. So the federal government doesn't do that, but when states have large amounts of students in one subgroup, they kind of have an obligation to do that.
so we're actively pursuing that data to make it transparent, to make it public. Amir, can you clarify in these columns for arrests, 317, is that per 1,000? What is the...
I'm sorry, so that's the raw number of arrests. So,
total number of arrests.
Yeah,
Okay,
the raw
thank you.
number. A few hundred arrests, right? Which, in a perfect world, that would be 0, right? We know children have existed for a very long time, but our juvenile justice system has only existed for about 150 years, right? So or about 100 years, actually. So we used to do things before we put them in cages that didn't involve cages. So that could be 0, and it can move down. So, yeah, it's just the wrong number.
Thank you. And while you're bringing up
Oh, yeah, this is from the latest federal data, which is from 2015 and 2016. So that would indicate that, about 2 students a day, a school day here in Hawaii, Pacific Islander students have been arrested.
So Amir will be pulling up that toolkit. Everyone should have received this when they registered today. It's our event feedback form or our report card. If you don't mind filling that out and dropping it off, there will be a box outside at the table right here in the lobby so that we can continue to make sure we address your concerns and questions and make sure that our future events better meet your the issue areas that you're most concerned about.
I'm trying to switch the setting, I think. There we go. Perfect. Sorry about that. But this is the dashboard and the tool. So I created this all for you.
You have the URL in your program.
You have the URL, and it's interactive. So it looks stable, but you can see here when you hover over, it brings up the rates, the subgroups. So that red number is the number of total days lost to suspension, and we have that for each school. And again, this is federal data. And you can see it. You can even, let's say we wanted to just zoom on Oahu. We can do that, and we can see more. And the reason why the rings overlap is because we map this by zip code, and there are multiple schools and zip codes, but you can see there are a lot of hotspots. And what you can also do is search by school and sort. So it's currently sorted or ranked by the most days lost. So we can, if I reverse that, you wouldn't see as much purple. Every school you see in purple is twice the rate of the national average. So that's what that represents. So here, there are schools that are not suspending students. They're mostly elementary schools, unfortunately, but they exist. It's possible to operate, learning environment. But let's look at students with disabilities, days lost per 100 students, if we sort it by the highest rates for some of these schools. Let's see. Not sure why. I don't know if it's the internet or what. Well, my apologies. It's the connection.
The website is live now, so if you wanted to look at it on your phone, I'm not sure how it looks on your phone, but if you want to go home and look at it or tweet it out, go ahead and do that. I will be up here by the stage for questions afterwards. I'm not sure if our panelists will be able to stay, but thank you all so much for coming, and can we give a round of applause to our panelists for being here today?
And we have it for arrest too. So there's one for suspension and the other for arrest.
Thank you so much, and everyone have a good night.